The Memphis Grizzlies lost a basketball game they shouldn't have lost after their biggest win of the season. Yet that wasn't really the story coming out of that game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Ja Morant's ejection and a cryptic tweet from Desmond Bane all have the attention of Grizzlies fans, even more so than the loss to Oklahoma City. But we're going to talk about that and the other stuff too on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts on YouTube. You can subscribe there as well. Like, comment, make us a part of your viewing video pleasure, whatever you want to call it about the Memphis Grizzlies. By all means, make us a piece of that puzzle. And then, of course, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, whoever you get your podcast, we're there as well. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you. Today's episode is by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. The Memphis Grizzlies had a massive win over the Milwaukee Bucks. Extremely important victory for them. That standard setting or standard proving maybe a statement-making victory. It was such a win that on my last episode that I flew solo on, to Michael Cole, you'll notice, also not with me, as we start this new week, a week before Christmas, the biggest game of the Grizzlies' regular season history coming up at the end of this week that I'm sure DeMichael and I will discuss when the time comes. But before we get there, I told you on Friday that Milwaukee Bucks game was a statement. It was a chance for them to just show how dominant they can be, how good they are, even with Desmond Bane out. So much potential for greatness resided in this team, and it shined through against Milwaukee. The exact opposite happened against the Thunder. We'll talk about what went wrong in that Thunder game here in a moment. But first, I want to talk about officials. And I know my partner, DeMichael Cole, already covered this a little bit, so I'm not going to go too in-depth. You know, DeMichael's episode a couple weeks ago about the officials having too much power. I think that the officials are starting to have something out for Ja Morant. And I'm not sure why. That's not true. I am a little bit sure why. I have a feeling it has to do with how verbal Ja is with his displeasure, even if he's not directly addressing an official. It's kind of like I compare it to being someone who has their head down as a baseball player, maybe not directly talking to the umpire behind him who called a strike a ball or a ball a strike, whatever it might be, trying to figure out the strike zone, but you don't make eye contact with the ump, right? That's one of those unwritten rules in baseball. When you turn and face him or you confront, that's when you get in trouble. And I think that the way that Ja handles things in terms of interactions around the officials, saying things around the officials, probably goes against that a little bit. And that's not too surprising because Ja goes against a lot of conventional norms, right? There's a lot of things that he does that are outside of what is regular in an NBA circumstance. And I think in this particular way, it's very similar. However, that doesn't mean that he's bad for it or that he's wrong for doing what he does. Questioning an official's call is something that literally every NBA player does all the time. Watch a Golden State Warriors game and see Draymond Green lose his mind almost every possession. It's not just Draymond Green, to be fair to him. Watch any NBA game. And there is flailing, there is gesticulations, there is all sorts of things that go on in these games that don't result in ejections. So Ja gets a technical foul the first time in the game against the Thunder on Saturday night for saying something under his breath about the officials or saying something with a curse word in it about the officials. I'll pull it up here in front of me exactly what was said. And then the second time, and if you follow this on Twitter, chances are you've seen this already, what had happened was Ja was talking with a fan who was wearing a Ja Morant sweatshirt, obviously very active in terms of discussing things with Ja. And Ja said something along the lines of, I can't do much because the refs missed a call. And I'm quoting Lisa from Joe Mussado of the Oklahoman, who covered this story there, the beat writer for the Oklahoma City Thunder there in OKC. She was yelling to Ja, let's go. And he was just like, he can't do much because the refs missed a call. And there might have been a curse word in there, perhaps. The officials are saying that there was. But again, in NBA official John Goebel, this is from Drew Hill over the Daily Memphian, when asked if Morant was ejected for comments made to the crowd, the NBA official John Goebel said no. Goebel's explanation for the second technical foul, we already talked about the first one. Morant was assessed his second technical foul for making a comment questioning the integrity of the officials. The integrity of the officials, which is fascinating when you hear it like that. The integrity of the officials. That sounds a little thin-skinned to me, especially seeing far worse actions, right? And this isn't about whataboutism, right? Because I don't want people to think that I'm making excuses for Morant because this is Locked On Grizzlies. I think that Ja at times gets too comfortable in terms of the language he uses. That doesn't make him wrong for being frustrated. That does open him up by the letter of the rule to these kinds of things. I think he's third or fourth in the NBA now in terms of technical fouls assessed. Dylan Brooks is up there too. So part of that comes with the territory. And that's part of who Ja is as a player. So you take the good with the not so good in this particular instance. If this is what helps Ja be who he is, obviously you want to keep Ja on the floor. You get 14 technical fouls, I think it is. You miss a game. But I do understand his frustration. And the officiating, while that wasn't the reason the Grizzlies lost on Saturday night, we'll talk about why the Grizzlies lost here in a little bit. But it was certainly not the reason they lost that game. I am fascinated by the response from the officials in terms of just being very thin-skinned and allowing for that to impact them. And it's a challenge for the NBA because there's a lot of people that paid a lot of money, saved for months or weeks to be able to take their kids, take their wife, take their, go out with some friends. Ja Morant is at that point as a National Basketball Association athlete. He is an attraction. People go to watch him play basketball. So if he's not actively in the face of a ref, if he is not being blatantly disrespectful, if he is not doing something that is just outwardly terrible in terms of covering the game or representing the National Basketball Association, you have to be a little more mean than that if you're an official. It's a tough gig. Officiating is a tough gig, a thankless one in a lot of ways. The times that they're doing their job the best are when you do not notice them. That is a tough thing to swallow sometimes. But you have to be a little bit more in control of your emotions. Players are actively competing. That's not to say that Ja or any NBA player, any athlete in general, shouldn't have control of their emotions. But you have to be the cool head. You have to be the one that sets the standard and the tone for the game. And sometimes that happens. And you have really strong crews that even in complex situations can maintain steadiness and fairness. And other times, like you saw on Saturday night, an officiating crew loses control. And Ja Morant being ejected is a great example of that. Lisa, that super fan that Ja was gesturing to when the second technical foul happened, she felt so terrible that it happened. And it wasn't anything that Ja did wrong, especially to the person that, was being interacted with. T. Morant, Ja's father, FaceTimes with Ja from the locker room and goes and shows it to the fan, and they FaceTime on the side. That's embarrassing if you're the NBA. That is just a blatant laugh in the face. How ridiculous is this that I'm no longer playing because of an official getting in their feelings or an official overly analyzing a circumstance or situation and losing control of that moment. The Memphis Grizzlies did not lose the game on Saturday because of the officials. We're going to talk about why they lost here in a moment. but they most certainly, the officials, made an impact in the game that nobody paid a single cent to come watch them make. And that is an extremely frustrating thing, not just for fans of the Grizzlies, but for fans in general. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Prize Picks. I promise you that nobody came out and said, today I'm taking this official for more than 1.5 ejections. I'm taking this official for 2.5 fouls called. I'm taking this official for 6.5 more than technical fouls assessed. Nobody does that, right? They're talking about Luka Doncic and the points he scores, Ja Morant and the rebounds that he grabs, Steph Curry and the threes that he makes when he's healthy. That's Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is a great way to attack your love of the NBA or any sport. You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they go score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any given entry. You're not competing against other people. It's you against the projections available, and almost any sport that you watch has Prize Picks access. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They're currently operational in over 30 states as well as Canada. They are safe, and they have fast withdrawals. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match up to $100. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget. Book an SUV or minivan for a family road trip, a pickup truck for some errands, or even test drive an EV. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. The Memphis Grizzlies were severely annoyed by the officials on Saturday night, and that's certainly understandable for all the reasons we outlined earlier in terms of refs getting in their feelings, losing control of games, essentially not doing their jobs. You know who else didn't do their job on Saturday night? The Memphis Grizzlies didn't do their job, and they especially didn't do it when it came to defending the three-point line. Isaiah Joe, who was on the Philadelphia 76ers and essentially let go by that organization, was 5 for 8 from the three-point line. Lou Dort, who's an underrated player in the National Basketball Association, partly because he's played for the Oklahoma City Thunder for a long time, and they haven't been good in a long time. Dort was 3 for 4 from 3, 8 for 14 from the field. Those two players scored 47 points for the Oklahoma City Thunder, 23 for Joe, 24 for Dort. Dylan Brooks, 32 points on 24 shots. Nobody else on the Grizzlies scored more than 16. Ja Morant only had 6, only played 16 minutes, in part because of the officiating issues. But even before, Ja was ejected, 3 for 10 from the field, 0 for 3 from 3, only 2 assists, 2 turnovers, 5 rebounds, which is nice. But Ja was not having his best game even before that. So maybe a little bit of that frustration was creeping up. Again, I think it had more to do with the officials getting on Ja's nerve. Ja only attempted 1 free throw in those 16 minutes. I'm guessing a call or 2 was missed, and that was part of what irked Morant in that particular way. But when you have Lou Dort and Isaiah Joe combining for 47 points, it's going to be hard to win basketball games. When you have a bench that the Thunder put out there, like Trey Mann, Aaron Wiggins, Kenrich Williams, that score a combined 36 points, that's a problem. That's a problem, especially when your bench does not have that same level of production. Brandon Clark, decent game, especially offensively, 3 for 4 from the field, but he struggled at times with his defense. Tyus Jones shot well in terms of scoring, raw scoring, but he was 5 for 14 and he scored 14 points. That's a stat line that Rudy Gay would love, right? So those two guys need to be better. John Conchar, 1 for 3 from 3 in 23 minutes of play. Jaren Jackson Jr. scored 16 points, 8 for 10 from the free throw line, so that's a positive. 8 rebounds in 28 minutes. But again, when Ja's not out there, Jaren's got to take over, and he didn't take over. Dillon Brooks was the one that was willing to at least try to take over. And that's another reason why the Grizzlies didn't win. Because that is not good. When Dillon Brooks is your number one offensive option, you're not a good basketball team. And when you're not willing to control and play offense the way that's supposed to be played, and you're not capable of defending the three, the Oklahoma City Thunder scored 39 points in the second quarter. 39 points. At the end of the first quarter, it was 25-21. Oklahoma City up by 4. Slow start, right? Slow start. You can do better, Grizzlies. Get it together. Pick it up. They didn't pick it up. It got worse, right? And then in the second half, Memphis makes it a game. They win the third quarter 33-27, and then they win the fourth quarter 33-24, but they start way too late. They didn't take the Thunder seriously. And you heard Brevin Knight and Pete Pranica, the play-by-play and the color commentator for the Grizzlies broadcast, the analyst and the play-by-play. They talked about why the Grizzlies lost, and a big part of it was not being ready to play. The Thunder didn't have their two best players, Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They did not play in this game. There were starters for the Thunder like Jalen Williams, who went 0 for 8, 1 point, made one free throw in 30 minutes of play. They lost to that team. Eugene Omoruyi, 16 minutes started, 7 points, 2 for 9 from the field. Pokuševski, that people love there in Oklahoma City, 9 points, 3 for 10 shooting. This was not an elite Thunder performance. This was not an elite Thunder team. This loss had more to do with the Grizzlies not being ready to play. As up for the Milwaukee Bucks game as they were down for this game. They were not engaged, especially in that second quarter. There were defensive miscommunications. Multiple times there were open shooters that shouldn't have been open. And this is the Thunder team that the Grizzlies had beaten by double digits twice. In November, they beat the Thunder by 11. Earlier in December, 10 days prior, they beat the Thunder by 21. And that was when they were closer to full strength. SGA played that game. He played. They simply were not ready for this contest. They were not ready to compete. And the Thunder took advantage of it. The thing about the NBA is every player in the NBA is an NBA player. What do I mean by that? You go to the G League and it might be hit or miss, right? Maybe each roster has 4 or 5 guys that are capable of making an NBA roster, right? Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. That's the average. In college, there's plenty of teams in the NCAA college basketball ranks that don't have any NBA players on them. There's some that have 2 or 3, maybe even more, right? In the NBA, every team has 15 to 17, definitely 15 NBA players on their roster. You have to be ready to play. Doesn't mean you have to have your A game every night, because the Grizzlies aren't going to have their A game every night. But it means, again, we've talked about on here, I've talked about it on the show, defense travels. Defense travels. And they did not travel to Oklahoma City, especially in that second quarter. It was a terrible showing. Like I said, miscommunications, missed rotations, open shooters. And the problem with missing these rotations is when you overhelp, now you have dribble penetration. You have easy passes. You have easy looks at the basket. That's a problem. Something that did not happen to the Grizzlies in their 7-game winning streak. It wasn't a concern. It wasn't something that held them back at any point. Or very rarely. The Thunder took 45 threes. The Grizzlies took 45 threes. The Thunder made 7 more. That's obviously a major reason why Memphis lost the basketball game. The Grizzlies were out-rebounded. The Grizzlies only had 15 assists in this game. The Thunder had 29. 29 assists. 29. Almost doubled them up. The Grizzlies only had 38 points in the paint. The Thunder had 4 points less. So the things that Memphis does well, create offense, share the basketball, hit the glass, score in the paint, they didn't do well in this game. They settled, they didn't communicate, and they were not invested in trying to win that game the way that they should have been. The Thunder took advantage of it. Kudos to them. They deserved the victory. Thankfully, maybe some help's on the way. right? Maybe there's somebody coming along that could perhaps help Memphis get back to their winning ways. And again, they just won 7 in a row, so they were doing pretty well, including that big win over the Bucks. It's not like they give that game up because they played poorly against the Thunder, but still, having this guy back would help a lot. And we'll talk about who that is and how that might be a reality, maybe an early Christmas gift for Grizzlies fans coming up next year on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen every day. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today. It's the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by ExpressVPN. We all know how ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online, right? Here's something you may not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. ExpressVPN allows you to binge The Office on UK Netflix. It's so simple to do. Just sign into Netflix, fire up the ExpressVPN app, change my location to the UK, refresh Netflix, and that's it. ExpressVPN lets you control what you want sites to think or where you want sites to think that you're located. You can choose and control from almost 100 different countries. Just imagine all the Netflix libraries you can go through. Do you love Korean dramas? Use ExpressVPN to parasite off South Korean Netflix with your Netflix subscription. But it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service: Hulu, BBC, iPlayer, YouTube, you name it. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason to use ExpressVPN to watch shows is because it is ridiculously fast. There's never any buffering or lag, and you can stream in HD, no problem. ExpressVPN also works on all your devices, so you can watch what you want on the big screen or on the go. So, if you want to get access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/lockedon right now, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon, expressvpn.com/lockedon to learn more. We'll talk more about the impending return of Desmond Bane next year on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, and we're going to close with an emoji. A very exciting emoji if you're a fan of Desmond Bane. And if you know me, you know that I am a fan of Desmond Bane. I'm a big fan of what he is physically capable of as a basketball player. He was having an all-star caliber start to his season before his toe injury sidelined him. Hasn't played in at least a month, if not longer. On Sunday, Desmond Bane tweets out one emoji, 2 eyes, looking a certain direction. Very interesting, because this emoji oftentimes can lead to wondering, being curious. In the replies to this tweet, somebody that was curious about what it meant, replying back with the same eyes emoji, Ja Morant. The aforementioned target of official disdain, Ja Morant, who replied to that tweet again with a picture of he and Des dapping up before a game that Desmond Bane was starting in and playing. Interesting, right? And we had heard that Bane was likely out the next several weeks. It had been reported that, towards the end of 2022, probably the start of the year, around that time period, a week after this one for sure, right? We all kind of wrote off for at least a time Bane being available for the upcoming Christmas Day game. Maybe we were premature in that, because this coming week's schedule, the Grizzlies play on Tuesday against the Phoenix Suns, which obviously will be an important game for the Denver Nuggets. My mistake. They play the Denver Nuggets on Tuesday. Then on Friday, they play the Phoenix Suns. Friday, they play Phoenix. And then Sunday, of course, is the biggest regular season game in Memphis Grizzlies history as they take on the Golden State Warriors on ABC. The prime time main event game is Memphis and Golden State, 8 o'clock on Christmas night. Major deal for the Grizzlies, and we'll talk more about that later in the week. So they got Denver on Tuesday, Phoenix on Friday, Golden State on Sunday. So 3 games this week. And they played on Saturday, of course, so they had a couple days off leading into the Denver game. And then they'll have another couple days off going into Phoenix. So maybe, just maybe, we will get a sneak peek at Desmond Bane and his impact sooner than we thought. And the reason I say sneak peek is they are going to be cautious with Bane, because they're cautious with everybody, right? Except for maybe Ja Morant. But Ja Morant is kind of a physical freak, I think we've all learned about him. He just heals in a remarkable way, and he bounces back faster than a lot of guys. So I think that they understand how important Bane is, and they know the stakes. They know they're a championship contender. Saturday night's performance excluded. Again, it doesn't cancel out what they did against the Bucks. Doesn't cancel out what Bane did to start his season, his injury. He was converting offense at a rate that was extremely impressive. He was extremely efficient as a scorer. He was in the 88th percentile among wings in points scored per shot attempt. He was having a great season, a career season when it comes to his assist percentage. He had a massive usage jump from last year to this year. He was showing signs of, again, being an all-star caliber player. Maybe he wouldn't make it because the West is loaded in that backcourt set and the backcourt spots, but he's in that conversation. He's having that kind of season, certainly going to get paid this coming summer. And then he got injured. Jaren Jackson Jr. returns as Bane leaves the fold. We have not seen Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Steven Adams, Dylan Brooks starting together yet this season. That means that we have not seen a true reserve unit of Tyus Jones, John Conchar, Zaire Williams, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark. 10-man rotation, 9-man rotation, whatever head coach Taylor Jenkins decides to put out there. Hasn't been seen yet. And having somebody like Bane as a steadying presence, because that's exactly what he is, not just in terms of how he plays, but his personality. I think his leadership is missed. Not to say that there aren't other leaders on the team, but I do think the team looks to Bane as that stoic presence, that guy who's steady. Cool hand Luke, doesn't shake, doesn't go away from the moment. He is capable of helping attack those adverse situations. So when you play a game on a Saturday night against Oklahoma City and nobody really feels like freaking being there, he could have been another guy with the potential to score, create off the dribble, do things physically to help Ja when he's not having as good of a start as he wants, to create space for these guys to attack the basket because defenses have to respect him as a three-point shooter. Bane's not only going to shoot the basketball at a high level, he is going to shoot it frequently. He is going to launch shots, take a lot of them. Can't say that about the guy that's currently filling his spot in the rotation in John Conchar. Conchar is not a threat like Bane is. He's just not. So Bane's presence would do wonders for this team. And I do think that the lightness of the schedule in terms of games is going to help in that way. Because you go to next week, Tuesday they host Phoenix, Thursday they're in Toronto, and then they have a back-to-back on New Year's between New Orleans and Sacramento. Thankfully, they don't have to travel for that back-to-back. It's all at home. But still, they have 4 games next week as the point, whereas this week they only have the 3. So another extra day of rest, an extra day of practice. Maybe we see Desmond Bane sooner than we thought we would. And that would help tremendously, especially on the offensive end. It would alleviate Ja's burden. It would create other opportunities. And for the first time, we would see the rotation as it's supposed to be. Whatever Taylor Jenkins wants it to be, he hasn't been able to implement it yet because Jaren was out to start the year, because Bane was out after Jaren left or Jaren got healthy. Grizzlies fans have been longing to see what this team is physically capable of. And it also allows for you, we'll talk more about this on tomorrow's show, it also allows for you to figure out if you need anything in the trade market. Poor Danny Green getting blasted by Brian Windhorst, not blasted, called out by Windhorst on ESPN about being a possible target for trade. So while the Grizzlies may not make a trade, that possibility still looms, but you can't really be in that market until you know what your team looks like. So they got to get these guys healthy. They got to get them on the floor, get at least a large enough sample size, 10 or so games, to have some semblance of an understanding of what your rotation is and what you need. Can only have that through playing the game, and can only get that if Desmond Bane is out there. So good health to Desmond Bane. Hopefully it is a good eye emoji tweet, and we see him this week, even if it's just, by Christmas. That game against the Warriors would be a wonderful one to come back for. But I'm going to be a little bit selfish and homerish and hope that it's sooner than that. Maybe Tuesday night against the Denver Nuggets, something we can talk about on tomorrow's episode. Thanks for making this episode of Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Again, the next time we are here on Locked On Grizzlies, DeMichael will be back with me. DeMichael Cole, my co-host of the Commercial Appeal. I miss him terribly. So excited to have him back. We'll talk about the upcoming Nuggets game. Maybe there's an update on Bane's status. And perhaps we'll dive into this Danny Green question in terms of what even we think the Grizzlies could need. We talked about it before, but again, we've seen this team play more since the last time we discussed it. Maybe his views have changed on that a little bit. I think mine have. And we'll talk more about that on our next episode. But until that time, thank you so much for making Locked On Grizzlies a part of your Grizzlies experience. We are on YouTube. Like, rate, subscribe, all those sorts of things. Comment, please, in the comments section. Let us know how we're doing or how we can be better. We can be followed. We can be subscribed to, rated, reviewed, anywhere you get podcasts. However you take in the show, thank you so much for doing so. And please continue to do so. Until next time, I'm Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. This is Locked On Grizzlies.